How lovely. Ah, yes. Ah, beautiful. Well, welcome. Sorry, I did not see you there, for I was admiring my lovely warm fireplace. Nevertheless, thank you so much for being here for my guide on becoming a well-mannered gentleman. To begin, a well-mannered gentleman is...
Well-mannered gentleman?
Yes.
This video is not actually about manners, it's about manner.
Manner? What in the devil is that?
It's like a resource in many video games that allows you to cast spells and such, you know?
Spells? What am I going to do with spells? But what about my guide?
Okay, we have a backup video that we might just roll instead. Don't worry, I can sort it out.
But I came all this way. I've been here for 6 hours waiting. Welcome, it's your friendly neighbourhood badger here, and I am back with one of my favourite builds I have ever created. Seriously, I thought I wouldn't be able to top the enjoyment of my last mega successful build, the Sentinel Queen, but this build exceeded all expectations, and crossed into the realm of unethical DPS on a relatively tight budget, compared to some of the more meta builds this league. Ugh. Introducing the well-mannered gentleman, a polite yet strong-willed ball lightning hierophant, abusing his extremely proficient understanding of etiquette and, well, manner. Too much manner. With the use of the support gem Archmage, we gain as much damage as we possibly can through this mana stacking mechanic, as well as using many fevered mines to increase the mana cost of our ball lightning. In order to capitalize on the increased effectiveness of a single cast of ball lightning, we stack Unleash seals as well. The gameplay that you're seeing right now is in a tier 16 Maze of the Minotaur map with Delirium running, and this is using the full damage version of the build, which is sacrificing some defenses. We will also talk about the defensive options. Offensively, this build is great on a small budget and absolutely insane on a large budget, and manages to keep up a large ES pool for defenses. Like always, I will take you all through both versions, and below you will find the color bar, this time with handy little images to guide you to each section if you need to jump around. However, it's now time to introduce the new, patented Badger Scale. 5 aspects of each build will be rated out of 5 badges in terms of power and viability, to give you an upfront sense of how each of my builds function. The well-mannered gentleman scores 4.5 out of 5 badges on bossing, 4 out of 5 badges on survivability, 3 out of 5 badges on clear speed, 3.5 out of 5 badges on cost, and 16 out of 5 badges on mana. Before we jump into the guide, I'll take a second to plug my Twitch channel. I do stream 6 days a week at the link right here, as well as a clickable link in the description, and you can see this build and many others in action. Come along and ask any questions you may have, I'm more than happy to answer them. Like all of my build guides, every price listed in this guide is taken at the time of recording. This means that prices most likely will rise over the course of a week or two from the release of this video. Only take prices as a rough guideline into the minimum spend for the build. However, without further ado, let's jump into the budget, gear and links. I'll be going through the gear in no particular order, but it does make sense to start at the main links and our chest piece. You will notice a common theme in most of the gear you'll be seeing on this character, which is mana. We need so much mana, and the chest piece is no exception. We will be using the Ivory Tower. The Ivory Tower is a unique chest piece released in the 3.9 Conquerors of the Atlas patch, which mainly allows us to go low life without using Chevron's wrappings. The mod Chaos damage is taken from mana before life means that with a very large mana pool that we will be achieving, Chaos damage is not going to be able to affect our very low life pool. We also do get some energy shield per reserved life, and some great mana and good intelligence to boost that mana even further. To top it all off, we have some energy shield per second. That's right, folks, we are going low life on a fiscally responsible budget. Are you ready for this? For the budget version, you can pick up a 5-link ivory tower with at least 90 max mana and at least 50 intelligence for a very small price of 20 chaos. In the ivory tower, we are socketing our main skill, which is Ball Lightning. Ball Lightning is linked to Archmage, Unleash, Greater Multiple Projectiles, and Arcane Surge. For killing bosses, you want to switch Greater Multiple Projectiles for Slower Projectiles. If you do have the currency for a 6-link ivory tower, you can then socket in Lightning Penetration. The next necessary item in this build is a Prism Guardian Arcan Kite Shield. Prism Guardian is going to give you some great resistances, but that's not why we're using it. The main reason we use Prism Guardian is it has the mod Socketed Gems have 25% reduced mana reservation, and Socketed Gems have Blood Magic. This means that we can situate 3 different auras into our Prism Guardian, bringing us straight down to low life, and meaning we can allocate Pain Attunement on the tree for 30% more damage. Prism Guardians are quite popular in the current Delirium League, but there is a plethora of corrupted versions on the market. We're just looking for a 3-linked blue socket Prism Guardian, which can be anywhere from 15 to 30 chaos. The 3 auras we are placing in our Prism Guardian are Discipline, Zealotry, and Wrath. The best weapon for a build like this is honestly just a fairly cheap wand. You can spend quite a bit of money into a really good one, but to get one average, you're only going to be spending about 10 chaos. For example, this one I bought here for a measly 10 chaos. You're wanting to look first and foremost for at least 150 maximum mana on the wand, and then you can supplement this with just as much percentage spell damage as you can. This wand does have a little bit of flat damage to spells, but in the grand scheme of things, this almost does nothing for our DPS. The links in the wand on the budget version are actually very much up to you, but if I could give a recommendation, I do like running with a Tempest Shield linked to Curse on Hit and Enfeeble. Next to the boots. We can just use some rare boots if we want, but the best that I've found for the budget version of this build is actually Dance of the Offered Shackled Boots. This isn't a unique that's used very often, and so you don't see it around, but this gives a good amount of mana, some lightning res and move speed, and also gives you onslaught while not on low mana. You do have the downside of losing 30 to 40 mana per second, however, on this build, that is not going to matter whatsoever because you're regenning so much more mana per second. These boots just range from 5 to 10 chaos. The links are as follows in the boots. We have Arcane Cloak linked to Increased Duration, and then we have Flame Dash linked to Second Wind. With the gloves, you're just looking for a fairly cheap item that has a good amount of mana, some resistances to try and help cap you off, and some dexterity. Try and get as much dexterity as you can here, because it's one of the only places we will be getting dexterity. Firstly, we have a Wave of Conviction linked with Culling Strike, and then we also socket in Curse on Hit and Conductivity. These gloves will run you around about 20 chaos. Next, we're going to talk about the helmet, which introduces a buff to a mechanic we are using in this build, that is Unleash. On the Redeemer Influence mod on helmets, you can get +1 to the maximum number of seals for Unleash. This does mean that Ball Lightning will cast an extra time every time you unleash. An example of a helmet I bought for the budget version of this build only cost me 30 chaos, and it came with a good amount of mana and some good resistances as well. But to be safe, I'm going to price this type of helmet at around about 50 chaos. This does include level 3 cast when damage taken, level 5 Immortal Call, level 5 Summon Flame Golem, and level 5 Phase Run. Now, it is important that Phase Run is in the last socket of your links. This does mean that it activates after everything else activates. If you have it further before, it is going to cancel itself out when the next cast when damage taken spell procs. However, you may notice that this helmet is a Hubris Circlet. It is quite difficult for you to obtain 4 off colors on a Hubris Circlet, so you can also get these mods, mana resistances and the Unleash mod, on any other base helmet. A Hubris Circlet is good because you do get some more energy shield, however. And that's it for the items with the links, but we still have the Amulet, rings, and belt to talk about, so we're going to move to that right now, and we'll do it all in one lump sum. First of all, the amulet that we're using is Atziri's Foible. Atziri's Foible is the best in slot amulet for a build like this, and the endgame version is using the exact same amulet. This gives a massive amount of mana, some percentage increased mana, and amazing mana regeneration rate. The last mod is not to be underrated as well. Items and gems have a 25% reduced attribute requirement. This is meaning that all of your dexterity and strength gems that you're using are going to be a lot easier to equip, as well as items. This amulet is only around about 4 to 5 chaos. However, the best thing you can do for this amulet is to use the fertile catalysts on it, bringing life and mana modifiers up by 20%. Next up, the rings. Here you can see these are 2 rings I've purchased for the budget version of this build, and they're around about 10 to 20 chaos each. Keep in mind that you're needing some good resistances to cap you off, some good mana, and also on one of the rings you are wanting a high strength roll, or a lower strength roll on both. And lastly, the Bated Breath. This belt is one of the only items we're wearing that does not have mana, however it has really good energy shield increases, which is amazing for our survivability. The cheapest item in our kit, this belt is only going to be 1 chaos. The flasks themselves on this build are fairly important, so I'll quickly go over them. In no particular order, you are going to want an Atziri's Promise, a Basalt Flask, preferably with immunity to bleeding, a Quicksilver Flask with increased movement speed, a Wise Oak, and an Enduring Divine Mana Flask. These flasks will only cost you 2 chaos, 2 chaos, 2 chaos, 3 chaos, and 2 chaos respectively. The very last thing I will mention is that you are going to want to put away a little bit of money for your cluster jewels and for your fevered mind jewels. Now, they are going to be quite expensive, so I would set aside around about 100 to 150 chaos for these things. I will talk about them in the skill tree section, but for now, just sit that aside, and we're going to move on to the end game build. Get ready, there's some pretty insane upgrades. It does make sense for me to talk about the endgame version of this build while displaying all of the items that I've actually collected for this build so far. I'm in the process of min-maxing, I'm almost done, but there's still some things we can definitely do to improve the build. Nevertheless, I will go over everything that I can here for you. First of all, we're going to start with the Ivory Tower. Nothing really much changes from the budget version. We still have a 6-link Ivory Tower. We have Ball Lightning linked to Archmage support. We then have an Awakened Unleash, which gives us more damage from the standard Unleash, an Awakened Lightning Penetration, a Slower Projectiles Gem, which then switches for greater multiple projectiles if you are clearing. And lastly, to finish off, we have Arcane Surge support. That is pretty much the setup that you're going to be wanting. This 6-link Ivory Tower is only around about 2.5 Exalted Orbs, although I have very high rolls on this, so try and get as high rolls as you possibly can. The Awakened Gems are going to cost you a little bit more as well. The next important thing I will move on to is actually the helmet. This helmet we have self-crafted, and we managed to get lucky with a good resistance roll, but this is self-crafted by having 2 different helmets, one with the skill supported by Unleash mod, and one with the nearby enemies have -9% to lightning resistance mod, and squishing them together with an Awakened Orb. If you don't know the mechanics of an Awakened Orb yourself, there's lots of videos out there, so definitely just search mechanics of Awakened Orb on YouTube and you'll be sure to find something great. So it took me about 3 tries to get something good here, and I also have the enchant 24% increased Ball Lightning area of effect. I will get to area of effect of Ball Lightning in the mechanics section of this guide, because there's something very large to go over in how DPS is calculated for Ball Lightning. So we'll get to that later, but all I would say is stack as much area of effect as you possibly can on Ball Lightning. Next, just quickly to Atziri's Foible. Atziri's Foible, exactly the same amulet that we are using on the budget version. As you can see, I have used the life and mana modifier catalysts, which are fertile catalysts, and I do also have thunderous salvos allocated, but I'm not going to talk about that now. That will be in the skill tree section. Next, nothing changes with the Prism Guardian, still an amazing shield. The +2 gems to aura or AoE skills for Prism Guardian is very, very sought after for your Herald builds, but unfortunately on this build, it only gives us about a 1% damage increase, so you do not need to pay 15 exalts for a +2 corrupted Prism Guardian, because you're also losing 12% to all elemental resistances. Keep that in mind. We will then move on to the wand. The wand itself is also self-crafted. You're just looking for, again, some really high mana roll, some spell damage, but then having 3 empty affixes to be able to craft the trigger a socketed spell when you use a skill, as well as spell damage. And some non-chaos as extra chaos damage. There's a couple of things you can do here, but the big thing is triggering that socketed spell when you use a skill. The skill gems are being switched around a little bit here, with the Wave of Conviction being in our wands to be triggered, as well as a Tempest Shield and increased duration. This is just meaning that on the first cast, our Wave of Conviction gets casted as we ball lightning, and then second cast, we do an Arcane Shield. Although I do have the MTX for not displaying the Arcane Shield or the Tempest Shield. As you can see though, it is up here in the corner as a buff. We will then move on to the rings. The rings themselves probably could be improved a little bit, but you're just looking for really high mana and maybe even some % increased mana, which is from a Subterranean mod, which is a Delve mod if you do not know that. And then also just looking for some good energy shield. You can put your Fertile Catalysts on these rings as well to just bring the mana right up. Again, you are going to need a little bit of strength on the rings. For the boots, you want to be searching for your Skyforth. Skyforth is very important for this build for the endgame version. The main reason being you're getting, obviously, some really big mana, but that mod right down the bottom there, stun threshold is based on 500% of your mana instead of life, is just crazy, crazy good. This basically means I'm immune to stun because I have so much mana. Only a hit that would literally kill me would also stun me. If you don't have these boots, you are going to need to use the Soul of the Brine King, for you cannot be stunned if you've been stunned or blocked in the past 2 seconds, and we'll talk about that again in the skill tree section. In here, exactly the same links: Arcane Cloak, increased duration, Flame Dash, second wind. And lastly, well, not lastly, but lastly for the links, we're moving to the Fingerless Silk Gloves. You can see here that these gloves are pretty good. They could be definitely improved, but it's the first Culling Strike gloves I obtained. So they've got good mana, some dexterity to cap our dexterity off, and Culling Strike. Now, the Culling Strike is a very difficult mod to hit, so just be careful there in slamming your Warlord's Exalted Orbs on there. It's definitely the rarest mod. However, this does improve your DPS for, at around about 11% with Culling Strike on your gloves. It's very, very nice. Because we have moved our Wave of Conviction into our wand setup, we also have a bit of a different setup in the gloves. First of all, we have Stormbrand. Stormbrand is not an Archmage Stormbrand, or sorry, Archmage Stormbrand I should say, don't worry about that. It's just there to proc our curses, which are Conductivity and Elemental Weakness. Now we do get past the base 1 max curse by using Awakened Curse on hit. Awakened Curse on hit, if you have level 5 or above, means that supported skills can apply an additional curse. This gem is quite expensive, and I managed to get a level 6 23%, which is crazy expensive, but you don't need a level 6 20%. All you need is a level 5 20%. I think at the moment they're around about 8 to 10 exalts. Actually, for the level 5, they're probably more, so around 12 to 15. Let me correct that a little bit there. That will mean that you will be able to apply both your Conductivity and your Elemental Weakness, and it will keep applying when you use Stormbrand on the bosses, which is very, very, very handy. And lastly, the belt. The belt itself is quite good, although it could be improved. We've got some great energy shield on there for basically increased maximum energy shield and flat energy shield. We got some good mana, we got some strength to cap us off, and some nice fire resistance on a crystal belt. A very, very nice belt here. For the flasks, almost everything is the same, apart from we are using a Cinder Swallow Urn for recovery of mana and energy shield when you kill an enemy during flask effect. This is very, very helpful to keep your sustain up. And for those of you who are going to be doing the budget version of this build, who are now watching this section, this should be your first upgrade. This is going to mean that your survivability and your mana resourcefulness within maps is going to be way better than without a Cinder Swallow urn, so make sure you pick one of them up for about 1 Exalted Orb. That's pretty much it for the gear, as you can see there. If you have any questions, there is the paste bin down below that you can have a check of, both the budget version and endgame version. And there is a damage version of the endgame version and a defensive version, which we're going to be popping into very, very soon. So we'll see you there. The passive skill tree for the Well-Mannered Gentleman is very similar between the endgame version and the budget version. However, I'm just going to go over everything right here, point out the cluster jewels that we use, the positions that we use our fevered mines, and all of the choices between damage and survivability you can take. There is in the description below a paste bin for both the budget version and the endgame version, and in the budget version you also have a leveling tree every 20 points. I'll talk about leveling a little bit later. First of all, we are an First of all, we are playing a Templar and we are playing Hierophant. Hierophant is really amazing to give us heaps amount of... First of all, we're playing a Hierophant. First of all, we're playing a Hierophant. A Hierophant is really great in giving us heaps of mana and great energy shield. It's also giving us insane buffs for Arcane Surge and making us immune to ailments. First of all, you'll be taking Divine Guidance. This is giving you increased mana, and the 10% of damage is taken from mana before life, although this doesn't work when you're going low life with Energy Shield. Transfiguration of Mind also gives us some great damage. Secondly, we will then be taking Sanctuary of Thought. This is giving us 20% of maximum mana as extra maximum energy shield, which does mean if we have around about 13,000 mana on the endgame version, that is giving us a flat 2600 energy shield just from this one node. We are also gaining 100% increased area of effect for our ball lightning. I'll talk about area of effect in the next section, which is the mechanics section, because it is a very underrated mechanic for ball lightning. We do have the mod 50% less mana cost of skills. Now this actually goes against Archmage, but we combat that by stacking many fevered mines. And lastly, the 10% less mana of reservation of skills is very helpful, meaning that we can basically reserve all of our life. Then we move on to Illuminated Devotion. This is giving us even more increased area of effect, and some spell damage leached as life while you have Arcane Surge, as well as increased spell damage while you have Arcane Surge, 40%. And lastly, we take Arcane Blessing. This means we don't have to worry about anything to do with freezing, shocking, or igniting, keeping our flasks a little bit easier to roll for like bleeding and everything like that, and it's a really good quality of life. If you want to go for something a bit more damage worthy, you can instead take Conviction of Power. It is going to give you a little bit more damage, however, I would strongly recommend going Arcane Blessing over Conviction of Power. To the tree itself. I'm just going to quickly go over this, and you can check it a bit further in depth down below in the paste bin if you do want to have a little look at that. But basically, we're just trying to pick up as much increased mana on the tree as we possibly can. We come out of here, and lots of dual sockets as well, so we're gaining heaps and heaps of dual sockets, Elemental Overload because we're not going crit, Energy Shield and mana here, and then the cluster jewels here. I'll talk about them just in a second, but first of all, I'd like to talk about this Healthy Mind. Healthy Mind is transforming life in radius into applying to mana at 200% of their value. That does mean in this position right here, these three nodes and these three nodes, all of the life is being transformed into mana, meaning right here, we've got 10% mana, 10% mana, 20% mana, which is a total of 30% increased mana here, and then we've got 10%, 16%, 10%, 26% here. So in total, this jewel is converting all of this into 56% more increased mana, which is really nice. A perfect spot for a Healthy Mind jewel. We take some lightning damage, and we come down here, and basically every other jewel socket is fevered mines. The one thing to keep in mind is in one of our cluster jewels, we're using a Watcher's Eye, which gives us Consecrated Ground you create while affected by Zealotry causes enemies to take increased damage, as well as energy shield gain for each enemy hit while affected by Discipline. This Discipline mod is really helpful for survivability, but this jewel costs around about 20 to 25 exalts. For just the Discipline mod, you're looking at around about 15 to 20 exalts. So keep that in mind. It's very good for survivability and one of the best upgrades you can make. Now we will talk about the cluster jewels. For these cluster jewels, I've gone for lightning damage cluster jewels, and on both of them you want to be hitting Scintillating Idea. Scintillating Idea is giving us 20% increased mana and 5% of lightning resistance penetrated as well. On one of them, we are using a disorienting display for 25% increased elemental damage and chance to blind enemies when you use a skill. And then the other one, we're using a prismatic heart for 30% increased elemental damage. On this jewel over here, we are grabbing Supercharge. Lightning damage with non-critical strikes is lucky. However, this node is not important whatsoever. This jewel with this node is actually worth a lot of money. But without this, we're actually only losing a total of 3% damage for 2 points. So it's not really worth it at all to take this, but I do anyway, just because it's right there and there's not much else I can really put it into. And the other node up here is a widespread destruction, which again is a little bit of area of effect and a little bit of elemental damage. The small cluster jewels that we are using is pretty much only one in the damage-oriented version, which is granting us openness and increased maximum mana, plus to maximum mana, I should say. On a 3 passive, added small skills grant 6% increased maximum mana base. The other thing that we will actually have a quick little look at is the survivability version, which only changes one of 2 things. First of all, one of our Fevered Mind jewels is being changed for another small cluster jewel, and these small cluster jewels are being changed from openness to Will Shaper, gaining 5% of max mana as extra maximum energy shield. With 2 of these, that is giving us an extra 1600 flat energy shield on top of that. You can see here the energy shield is just shy of 9000 with the survivable version, and with the damage version, it's at 7.5. So a big increase there. The other thing I'll quickly talk about is the Thunderous Salvos. Thunderous Salvos is the anointment that you're going to be wanting on your amulet. Now this does take 2 golden oils, which is a bit expensive, so we'll just talk about a budget option in a moment. But this is giving us another Unleash stack. So that's 1 from the helmet, 1 from Thunderous Salvos. The critical strike chance to spells we don't need whatsoever, but the Unleash is amazingly good. Basically, this is a 20% more multiplier, which is really amazing. For budget, you can very, very easily just get something like Battle Rouse, which gives you increased mana and max mana, and damage taken gains as mana over 4 seconds when hit, which is really, really nice, and that one is very super cheap. So for the budget version, you want to be taking Battle Rouse. You can also take something like Primal Spirit, and you can even take something like Mana Flows, but those are a little bit more expensive as well, with silver here and gold here. Just before we finish up, I'm just going to quickly save that. We are going to go into the budget tree, and I'll just quickly show you pretty much nothing changes apart from using Will Shapers and not using the Watcher's Eye. And we are also having a little look here at the leveling tree. First of all, it's just 20 points by 20 points. And you can have a look here. I say start with Stormbrand. We'll talk about this in the leveling section, but it's much easier for you to start with Stormbrand and then to switch to Ball Lightning around about 40 to 50 points, getting your Elemental Overload. You are going life-based as you are leveling, so you're grabbing quite a few life nodes going through. And then basically at 80 points, you're switching to low life energy shield. So you'll then be respecking out of some of the life nodes, you'll be putting in your healthy mind, and you'll be taking pain attunement and equipping your Prism Guardian to be able to use your auras on your life. That's pretty much it. The endgame 100 points and endgame version is very, very, very similar. And that's everything there. You can find all of the items used in the budget and endgame version trees down below. Take a little look at that. But we are going to move on to the mechanics section of the build. The mechanics of Ball Lightning Archmage damage is quite important to understand, as trying to gain the most damage out of Ball Lightning through tooltip DPS and path of building DPS will actually mean you're missing out on so much potential damage. Archmage is best used for massive single casts, and then moving around for a while as your mana regens and you dodge things. For example, look at the increase in total DPS if I change Unleash for Spell Echo. Spell Echo is meaning that I technically cast way quicker, therefore Path of Building is calculating the DPS higher. But the massive thing to note is that the only stat we are really looking at for damage is the average hit. With our maximum Unleash stacks, Ball Lightning is casting 6 times in rapid succession, in which each of those balls can shotgun our enemy. Ball lightning has an internal cooldown of 150 milliseconds per strike on enemy, meaning that over a second, a single ball lightning cast can hit the enemy for 6.3 times this shown damage. For this DPS here, that means that in 1 second, ball lightning is hitting for 349,401 damage times 6 stacks of unleash times 6.3, which equates to 12,578,436 damage per second. If we calculate the spell echo damage, it is 311,365 damage times 2 stacks of spell echo times 6.3, which is only 3.9 million damage per second, an insanely massive damage loss. Assuming with slower projectiles and a stationary target, ball lightning will be damaging for around about 2 seconds per full unleash cast, which will be dealing close to 25 million Cirrus damage per cast. During this time, as ball lightning is traveling, we can wander around and dodge spells and attacks, not needing to stand still at all, meaning it is way safer than many other builds out there that are channeling or standing still while dealing damage. The next important mechanic to go over is ball lightning area of effect. For a standard level 20 quality ball lightning, its activation range, or radius in which the ball lightning will strike the enemy, is 22, which looks like this. With the increase of area from our Ascendancy and Helmet enchant, we bring this radius all the way up to 33, which is a very nice 1.5 times increase. What this means is that it is effectively a 50% more damage multiplier per cast on a standing target, as the target will be in range for 50% longer. Thus, area of effect is very important, but keep in mind it does have diminishing returns the more that you stack, and it's not actually increasing the speed at which you deal damage, only the amount of damage per cast of ball lightning, which works in tandem very well with our big Archmage casts. I'm not going to be talking very in depth with the leveling of this character because it's actually very simple to level. It's a very standard mage while you are leveling, grabbing some life on the tree, and you can check the pastebin again if you would like to for the leveling process. But basically, you're just wanting to be grabbing a store brand at level 12. Before that point, you can just be using Freezing Pulse. Freezing Pulse is really great just to clear with, and an added lightning damage. And you can also, for a 3-link, use a Controlled Destruction, which you can get in Act 2. You can also pick up in Act 2 a brand recall to just help your sustain of your storm brands through maps. You can very easily level with this setup all the way up until level 38, where you can pick up Unleash, which is at the end of Act 4. At that point, you're also going to be socketing Archmage and Ball Lightning, and you can switch to your Ball Lightning setup. For clear, you want to be using greater multiple projectiles, and then putting in that slower projectiles when you're against Act bosses and everything like that. You are going to be astounded by the damage. However, if you don't want to level with this build and you want to level with something a little bit quicker and you have the currency for it, which is, about an X or maybe 2 Exalted, there is a link down below as well to my leveling guide with the 1-for-nothing duel, which is unarmed leveling, can be done with any character. It's very quick, very simple, and some of the craziest damage you will see during the leveling process. So definitely check that guide out if you haven't as well. But that is pretty much it for everything here, guys. I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to cover on this build. We are going to leave you with some end gameplay, boss killing, and everything like that. But thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to, again, come watch me stream, link down below. And make sure if you enjoyed this build guide, hit that subscribe button. And that bell as well is very important. You're not really going to get notified much unless you click that little bell down there. So give that one a hit. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, Badger out. Yes! One shot. I actually did it. Okay. Can we one-shot? Can we one-shot? Come on. Come on. Come on. One-shot time. quickly can I phase this? One cast phase? Almost a one cast phase. There we are. Phase there. Woof! I can almost one cast phase Cirrus. Awaken a level 8? Yes, 84 Awaken a level 8 is what we're on, which is quite nice. We're out of potions though. Alright, on to last phase. Now, we may potentially die on last phase here, we'll see. We will see, shall we? Okay. Where'd he go? Up here? There he is. There's some really good damage. Very nice. Got him down easy peasy.